We're going to hear from Liz Wells now from National Grid Ventures. She's been involved in projects in Yorkshire, the carbon capture, usage and storage project there. In Lincolnshire, the Viking Link interconnector. And we're going to hear from her today, the bit in the middle, Humber's low carbon. Over to you, Liz. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul, and thank you, Darren, for the invite today for this conference. If you bear with me, I'll check my technology is working, that you can see my screen.
Not there yet. It's coming. Yep, it's there, Liz.
Yeah, we can see that. Fantastic. So again, thank you very much, and really value the opportunity to come and speak today, and really interesting conversations today, really valuable presentations. By way of a bit of a structure to what I'd like to speak to this afternoon, introduce myself and my colleague, and then really we want to major on what we're doing in the region as it relates to carbon capture, storage and hydrogen, and the specifics of what that means for Humber. And then we'd like to spend some time talking about the consultation that's actively running and how we can get involved, and actively encourage those listening this afternoon to be involved in that process as well. So if I may, with introductions, my name is Liz Wells. I'm the Consents Manager for National Grid Ventures, and we also have my colleague on the line, Catrin Jones, of a similar profession and field. I'd like to spend a few moments just explaining who National Grid Ventures are. You may have heard of National Grid and National Grid Group. It will come as no surprise to understand that we have various different businesses which sit under that umbrella. In its simplest terms, National Grid Ventures looks at more first-of-a-kind technologies and ways of doing things differently, whereas our sister companies and businesses with the transmission owner and system operator look at keeping things moving, keeping the system balanced, keeping the national transmission system fit for purpose and up and running. I think Craig mentioned at the top of the session that Humber does really have it all, and I'm minded to agree. Whilst I'm here today predominantly to talk about CCUS, it would be remiss of me not to mention that our other main limb of our portfolio is that of interconnection. And picking up on some comments there about offshore wind and integration, we're actively promoting multi-purpose interconnectors. So pursuing the ability to integrate offshore wind with interconnection, and in its simplest forms, reducing the amount of infrastructure in both the marine and terrestrial environment. So happy to talk to that again, or take questions on that as we progress as well. But I thought it was worth mentioning that the sentiments that Craig spoke to at the top there, I fully agree with. So on to CCUS and hydrogen, the context for us and what it is that we're looking to achieve. Again, at the beginning of the year, you'll all be more than familiar with the publishment of the 10-point plan and the industrial decarbonisation strategy, both of which heavily majored on the ability for carbon capture and hydrogen production to contribute to net zero and decarbonisation for UK PLC. What that meant for us as a business, looking in this geography, was actually the ability that Humber has to arrive at a fantastic cluster position by virtue of its heritage and its industry. It produces a lot of carbon emissions, so we felt that that was best placed to make it and promote it as a cluster to reduce those emissions in the region. The outcome of the industrial decarbonisation strategy translated into BEIS running this year a cluster sequencing competition. So essentially it sought bids from various parts of the country, GB, so there was submission through from the northwest to Yorkshire and Teesside, Scotland, South Wales, South Coast, of promoting those prime clusters. Where should the government focus their attention on to look initially at 2 clusters for carbon capture, with a view to a more strategic outlay as time goes on. We have just received the news literally on Tuesday that the East Coast cluster, of which we are part of in Humber, has been successful and has been confirmed as a Track 1 cluster. So that's a huge testament to the work that we've been doing with the likes of Darren and the team, and internally with our partners, to promote Humber as part of the East Coast cluster as a location to take forward carbon capture. If this all sounds familiar, you're not wrong. We have been here before, previously involved in the Yorkshire and Humber cross-country pipeline. I think the key difference between now and then, if anybody was involved in that, is that previous project looked to take carbon from a singular project, which was Drax at the time, and take it out to a saline aquifer. The ambition this time is much bigger. It's a network. It's a network of carbon and hydrogen pipelines. I'll go back a step and talk to who the East Coast cluster are, because I'm conscious there's lots of acronyms and clarity as to who does what. So the East Coast cluster essentially is made up of Zero Carbon Humber and Net Zero Teesside. But that initially is brought together and joined together by the Northern Endurance Partnership, of which National Grid Ventures is a member. In its simplest terms then, the Northern Endurance Partnership under the East Coast cluster focuses on those aspects and equipment required in the marine environment to realise the full chain of carbon capture and storage. So it's pipelines in the offshore environment from Teesside and Humber respectively, through to a saline aquifer, an offshore storage, which we know as Endurance in the North Sea, where essentially we take that captured carbon and store it in perpetuity. The two limbs drawing from that then are Zero Carbon Humber, which I'm predominantly here to talk about this afternoon, and Net Zero Teesside. But that in totality makes up the East Coast cluster, and it's the East Coast cluster that this week has been successful in securing that track 1 status from BEIS. This is the same information essentially, but pictorially, so I was keen to articulate that and hope that's clear there by way of the geographies and the partners involved. Again, I think the key headlines from this image, that certainly for Humber, is that we can see a position where there's an ability to capture 17 million tonnes of carbon per annum that can be taken from our region through to the Endurance store. So that's a phenomenal number that contributes to net zero. And clearly, again, as Craig said at the top of the session there, there's economic drivers that support that as well through job creation for the region. Mindful of time, I don't want to speed too quickly, but illustratively then, what it means for Humber is the general state of play in terms of what we're looking at for a network of pipelines, advocating parallel carbon capture and hydrogen pipelines at its westernmost from Drax through to a landfall point on the East Yorkshire coast to take that captured carbon through to the store, picking up those heavy industry players and power generators within the region, the likes of Kiwi, the likes of Drax, the likes of H2H, British Steel, for example. There's a lot that can be capitalised on and used here. A few moments, if I may, on how we got to and what we're working through processes. Clearly working with Darren and colleagues and other stakeholders at Natural England, for example. How does that configuration present itself? What are the route options in taking carbon from the region out to the North Sea? We arrived at a couple of configurations, not to the team a disservice. Configuration A, as is on the screen here, looked at a configuration going south of the Humber. That would involve a Humber tunnel crossing through to the Salten site, and then some potential locations to landfall. I must stress that these are buried pipelines, you won't see them, but that's one configuration we looked at. A second configuration, mindful of the engineering challenge of what crossing the Humber means, and apologies for the pastel colours here, is that the Humber crossing was taken out of the equation, and we take another limb of the network around Beverley through to the east coast of Yorkshire. So working with a variety of parties, we've ultimately minded to go forward on configuration A, with two landfall options at the minute that we're seeking views on, be it Aldborough or Easington, and again working with stakeholders in the likes of the vicinity of Scunthorpe to understand actually the nuances on connecting to emitters in that area. So where are we today, and what does that mean for further engagement and opportunities for the environment? The plan on screen is that which is currently out to consultation. Our consultation ends this week, but by all means, don't let that stop you from contacting me afterwards. After this session, we really value all comments and thoughts and local knowledge as to what we need to think about going forward and looking at options. But this is essentially the configuration that we're seeking feedback on. We don't need all those limbs. It will be a pipeline, parallel pipelines from Drax through to the coast, but it's how do we get between the two from A to B, and what are the configurations and matters that we need to be alive to in arriving at that, including clearly the very important crossing of the Humber estuary and making sure that we do that correctly and properly. I'm particularly keen with that in mind to understand opportunities, and again, I think in the previous presentation just mentioned there, local opportunities for benefit biodiversity net gain, enhancement, local schemes, local opportunities, how we can work with you to make sure that this project not only realises the net zero ambition from reduction of carbon emissions, but actually goes beyond that in terms of biodiversity. And we're really, really keen to understand how we can work with local organisations on that. I wanted to just stress that this isn't the only opportunity that you have to engage with us in this project. My door is always open. Please feel free to pick up the phone and give me a ring. But now that we have the momentum of being confirmed as a Track 1 cluster this week from the government, we will be moving forward in the new year, and hopefully COVID restrictions permitting, a face-to-face consultation on refining those options based on the consultation that we've currently got. Where are we going to look to put our AGIs, above ground installations? So we need some compression facilities, operation and maintenance facilities to check on the pipeline. How can we work with the community and local landowners and parties such as yourself to realise where they can go? And then again, further consultation into the summer of next year. These programmes, as you can imagine, are fast paced to meet up with the ambition and the objective, and so we want to essentially be speaking to you for the next half of next year and through to an eventual application to realise this ambition. Again, happy to share links to our website and our literature and share those with Darren to cascade afterwards, but there's a lot of information out there that we're happy to share, and we're particularly keen to work with you. I won't labour the point anymore, but there's literature that is available and we're happy to share.